kitty. Look at you. Come on. You live in a sheet metal shop. All right. No tail, not a care in the world. Oh, yeah. All right, we got to make a video about triangulation real quick. You just find something to keep yourself busy for a little bit. Hey guys, welcome back to Sheet Metal is Fun. Today or tonight, whatever time it is where you're at, we're going to finish our squared around. We're going to bend up our patterns. We're going to put these little bins in here. It's going to look like a piece of jewelry. Look at that. So one of the things we want to do, just like we did when we made our plenum with an end cap and a collar, we don't make a left and a right. We'll notice that both of our seams are on the same side, so that these two patterns are the same. What that means is whenever we bend this up and we fold this around, there's going to be a seam against a raw edge. And the same thing over here. Look at this. Seam, the overlapping seam against the side with no seam on it. If we bent them up opposite, we would have two seams lining up together. And then whenever this end came around, there would be no way to attach the two halves together because we wouldn't have the overlapping seam. So that's why both pieces are the same. So what I've done is I've marked our 1/2 inch allowance seam on here, and we're going to have a 1 inch flange around the base. 1/2 inch lap for a seam, and a 1 inch flange around the base. And we're going to bend that up here. But since you went through all the trouble to come back for round 2 of introductory to triangulation, you get a free bonus. You get a bonus hole finder. So here's what we're going to do. Whenever did the tool tray, a lot of folks asked, why didn't we have a third pop rivet in this flange underneath? And we don't need it. Each pop rivet has around a 200-pound shear load. So if we're going to put more than 200 pounds in our little tool tray, we would have made it out of something a little more substantial instead of 26 gauge galvanized. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a third pop rivet, and it's going to go right here in this flange. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a mark where I want that rivet. And as you can see, I've made a mark in that downturn flange in our handle, but then that is in a very difficult place to drill. So what we're going to do is we're going to go quick and dirty. Watch this. We're going to take our angle finder. This is a piece of scrap off the back of the shear. I just bent it somewhere in half, roughly. It's just a piece of scrap. We're going to clamp that. Look at it, one end wasn't even. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to work from the clamped end toward the end back here. We're going to flatten this out. Now, as long as this is even all the way across, we're going to take our number 5 Whitney punch with an 1/8 inch hole, and we're going to punch a hole. So far, we haven't measured anything. We're going to leave our clamp in place. Now, we're going to come over here, and we're going to be careful to make sure we use the proper snip so that these pieces can't find us. Yellows and reds, they cut the same way. So let's just show this. If I use the reds on this side, now this piece, if I can see it, it can get to my eyes. Watch how magic it is when we go to greens. Look it. Now it's covered. Be careful you don't ever drop it. Don't worry, we'll figure that out in post. All right. So now all I've done is trimmed this off. We have this hole. And we are going to use this. I'm going to line one of my holes up with my black mark. And now we've located that hole. Let's do the same thing on this side. I'm looking where I left my mark, like where I want the rivet. I'm holding my piece. Put the mark on there. So what this did, this allowed me to transfer the mark from inside to this difficult to access area out here where it's nice and easy, where we can see it. Now, we could have measured, but these sloping sides sometimes make the measuring a little more challenging. But now we know if we drill a hole right there, we know where it's going to come out on the inside. Let's go ahead and do it. We've gone through all this point. Let's go ahead and drill a hole. Now, look at that. You're not going to guess where that hole is. It is right where we wanted it to be. No guesswork. Because can you imagine the look on your friends and neighbors' faces if they came over to look at your tool tray and you missed the flange and you had to drill another rivet? I'm going to see if I can get that around. Look, the rivet came out right where we put our mark. It worked once. Let's see if it works twice. Here we go. Ooh, I like that. Now, if I hold this up, you can see the rivet came out right where we wanted it, right where we marked it, and then transferred that mark to the outside. Same thing over here. Look at it. It's right in the middle. It's right where we wanted it. Hole finder. All right, that was free. Let's get back to the job at hand here. Let's go bend up our squared around. So right now, we're going to go over to the brake, and we're going to put these bends in, and that's going to show us the shape of our squared around. We're going to take our collar, too. Originally, I had thought about making a 3-inch tall collar like this one. I already cut the piece, but then I realized I haven't shown you guys, I don't think I've shown you how we're going to roll a crimp on the end of a collar. So I made a little bit taller, a taller collar. It's taller for a crimp because I want to show you a crimp tonight. All right, let's head over to the brake and bend up our square. All right, we are back at the Finger Smasher 5000. Woo, it does an awesome job. Just take my word for it. Don't try to prove it yourself. So here we have our 2 squared around patterns, both the same. And I marked the center. We had A1 and B1. I marked it with a prick punch just so I can see it. So what we're going to do, wait right here. Don't go away. It's visual aid time. What we're going to do is we're going to put these bends in here. And every time we put in a bend, it's going to put a radius on this end, but we're always going to stay at the same place on this one. So we're not going to get a radius bend on this side. So let's put our visual aid right here. And so that we get all of our bends uniform, we're going to move our brake to about right there. And over on this side, it has a rod that I can put it to some setting, and I clamp this vice grip on the rod, and then it stays. It's going to stay right there. All right, here we go. So the front of the brake here is a 1/2 inch. This is the 1/2 inch bending leaf. So I have the center line marked, so I'll know when I got to switch from A1 to B1. So I'm going to go to A, I'm going to go to 0, and I'm just going to pull the handle closed. Then I'm going to pull that mark. Here, I want you to see this. I just did that one. I'm going to pull it out till it's even with the front of the brake, 1/2 inch. This one stays in the same. That one's going to move every time. I'm going to do that again. Yeah, we're looking good. Yeah, this is looking great. Staying in the same place every time over here, but moving this out 1/2 inch. So at this point, what I'll do is I'll pull it out and get a visual on where that center line is, so I'll know when I'm getting close. Looks like I got one more before I get there. Now the last one is right on it. So now what I want is I want this wing to be 90 degrees. So I'm going to push this over so it's pointing straight up to the sky. So now you can see we've added a series of bends on this end, but no bends on this end. We're halfway through. So we stopped at 1. There's 1. So what we have just done is that. Now we're going to come over here, and you don't have to clamp and hold the brake like I've done. It just makes it easier. You could clamp it and bend each one individually. That's also a good way to do it. But this is the really good way to do it. All right, so we're going to go to B, and I'll start back at 1. I'm going to bring, this one is going to stay here. This one's coming out to a 1/2. Look at that. That thing's starting to shape like a squared around. And at this point, I usually pull it out, get an idea of about where I'm at over here, how much I got left. I got a few more bends. One more look. I'm going to split the difference. Our last one goes right here. We don't go to the end because that's our lap. So our last bend is going to be right there. And then we're going to give this side a little bit of persuasion. And look at that. So we're using bonderized. The reason we use bonderized is because our scribe lines show up better. So you don't get the dazzle that you get with galvanized. So now we bent them both up the same. This is the raw side. This is the seam side. Let's come right over here. Look at that. Let me grab my vice grips. So just like whenever we made our plenum, we don't make a left and a right. I want to make sure that you catch this, that these are both the same. This side has a seam, this side does not. This is what we call a raw edge. So now I'm going to take these apart, spin it around, and we marked our 1/2 inch seam. I'm just going to, there's our 1/2 inch right there. So we need to make sure that the 1/2 inch seam lines up on the raw edge. So I'm going to take the raw one, line up those edges. Same thing here, 1/2 inch lap. If you can look inside there, we get it right on, we're going to clamp it. And now we know we have a 1/2 inch lap. So before we go back to the spot welder, let's roll our collar up while we're right here. All this metal, it all has a memory. So once you bend it, it will go back to that spot. So what we're going to do next, we can take our vice grip off, which is going to relax the bending leaf. Here we go. So what I'm going to do right now, the collar has a little flare on it right here, where the fitting and the collar intersect. That's the overlap. That's where we're going to put the spot welds. So what I'm going to do, since the metal has a memory, I'm going to put this in here. Clamp it on the line that we made over there at the bench. And I'm just going to put in a little bend. And then I'm going to flatten it back out. Now what I've built into the collar is I've already given it the idea of where I want it to bend. So you see that bend? Now we're going to go over here to the rolls, the slip roll. The 2 rolls in the front are drive rolls. They have a gearbox over here so that as we turn the handle, it draws the material into the rolls. And the one in the back is just an idler. As it moves in and out with the adjustments, that's what decides the size of the diameter. So I've already got this kick in here. I'm going to come over here. It's pretty dark in here, but I'm going to back this off a little bit. The front 2 are drive rolls. They're pulling the material through. The back one is just an idler. It just free rolls. I'm going to go a little bit more. One more time. Last time through. It's better to sneak up on it. If you're just going to guess, because every time we make every diameter is going to be different, so it's better to come up a little short. Because if we bring this in back too far, bring back the idler roll, it will roll it too small of a cylinder, and then it's really a dogfight to make that cylinder big after we've made it too small. But if we just keep sneaking up on it, we can see right here that diameter in its relaxed position is exactly what we're looking for. So let's take this over to the spot welder. For the small stuff, we're going to use the small spot welder. After I show you guys how this works, we'll go back to buzz and we'll really hit it hard with buzz. So we've got our lap. Let's go ahead and spot weld this together. Look at that, man. They call it a spot welder, and yes, I am saying spot welder, S-P-O-T. They call it a spot welder because it welds in one spot. Pretty creative, huh? All right. Just going to keep working our way on up to the vice grip. I like it when it sparks. You know you're getting it when it sparks. All right. Now let's come back to this side. We have our 1/2 inch seam on here. Line that up. Come to this side. I don't know if you can look in there and see the line. Get it right on the line, right where we want it. A spot welder is basically a controlled short circuit. The voltage is trying to get from one arm to the other arm, so whatever passes in between the two arms, while the voltage is trying to reach from one arm to the other, whatever gets in the middle here is subject to extreme heat, and as you can see as I operate the handle, it's under extreme heat and under extreme pressure. And so that's the reason these points are filed to a small point, is because the smaller the point, the more focused the energy, and the more successful your spot weld is going to be. Probably at least half of the welds in an automobile are spot welds. Now let's do our collar here. I like to wiggle the work. You get a better chance of conductivity, because all of these materials, this is bonderized, this is galvanized. Galvanized is a thin coating of zinc over raw steel. Let me see, I got a piece of raw steel right here. What's underneath the thin layer of zinc is this cold rolled steel, and it would rust, but they take cold rolled steel at the mill and they dip it into a bath of molten zinc, and that's how we get this process called the galvanizing process. So there's really not anything galvanizing is actually the name of a process. That's what I'm trying to let you know, is that galvanizing, this is not galvanize. This is galvanized ED. It has been galvanized. It's been through the process of galvanizing. I think that does it. right, we're going to finish up our collar. So you'll see me wiggle it once in a while. I just want to make sure that we're getting a good burn on here. Yeah. All right, so we put this crease in our collar back on the brake, so it's already in there. Now we're going to go over here to the next machine. And we're going to put this in here. And we're going to add this offset back in here. It isn't going to take much. Notice with my left hand, I'm lifting the piece. My backstop moved. I'm going to go back around and see if we can clean this up a little bit from where my backstop moved. All right, I like that. So now you can see we've put the offset that we put it in initially on the brake. Now we're going to come back over to our squared around. Look at how nice that is. We got a little spot right here. Little one here. Whenever I put these collars on, I always just line up the seam. Why not, right? So all I'm doing is taking this, putting it down over the fitting. Let's just line up the seam just for fun. Now what I'm going to do is take my water-based marker, look at it, press down, and I'm just going to make some marks at 4 locations. I just want to double check to make sure, like this one is a little shorter than this one. See how this side has more lap than that side? The other sides look the same. So whenever I put my collar back on, I'm going to compensate. I have a greater lap here than here, so I'm going to cover this one, and I'm going to show a little line here. But the other two sides looked real good. So we had more lap here, so I'm going to show a little line there. Cover the line on this side, and then our collar is nice and good. So we're going to go back over to our spot welder. This thing is coming out so good. I'm glad you guys stopped by. Just think if you weren't here, it'd be a crying shame that nobody saw how good this was. All right. So I'm going to line up the seam. We're going to show a little line because this was the thick one. And I'm going to go ahead and make our first spot weld right there. Wiggle it around a little bit. Now I'm going to go opposite, and this is the side that we're going to cover the line. So I've put 2 spot welds in opposite of each other. So this is my last chance. If the collar is crooked, I can still make a correction. And I'm going to make a slight correction to this side. 1/16 of an inch. Now we're going to go opposite of that one. So now you can see our collar has overlapped our squared around. Look at that. I'm going to go ahead and put a few more spot welds. Depending on what we're going to do with our squared around, a lot of times these are for air movement, air conditioning, heating. Sometimes we'll have these in a wood shop, and it's for removal of sawdust or chips. So if it's air conditioning and heating, what we would do is we would seal this with sealant on the outside. If it was for a wood shop and sawdust chips, we would solder it. And there are even times we would solder it on the inside, just to smooth the transition. Less of a chance that something may decide to get clogged up and cause a traffic jam. We got one more spot weld. All right, now I want you to follow me over to the brake. Are you ready? So you've already seen us use the brake. We'll clamp our metal in here and then bend it. But look at what we're going to do here. What I've done is I put the scribe mark for our 1-inch flange. It's actually on the inside. The reason it's on the inside is because we are going to, look at this. I want you to get right here and see what's going on. I'm going to look through this corner, and I'm looking for the front edge. This is the bending leaf. I'm looking for that front edge. And I'm going to put my scribe line right on that front edge. So I'm looking straight down through here at my line. I'm going to close the brake. Here goes. Watch this. Oh my gosh. Did you see that? Look at that. Now we're going to do the same thing again. Once we get the first one, it gets a little easier to see the front, the bending leaf. One of the tricks of the trade. Here we go. Look at that. So now I'm going to put this in here and just give it a tiny little bit, little bump right here. Last one. And then we're going to just grab it at a 45. And I'm just making sure that this flange and this flange are both on the same plane. Going to grab it right on the corner. Look at that. I really like it. Now we're going to go to the crimper. And the crimper is what makes two diameters of the same diameter. One will fit inside the other because we're going to crimp this. This bead here, so the crimper has a place to stop. So we're going to slide it in, we're going to clamp this down, and just like we did with the slip rolls, we're going to go around more than once. Look at that, there's once. Going to tighten it down a little bit. It's going to clamp the work a little harder. There we go. Usually when the handle is pointing at me, that's about our last trip around. Look at that. So this puts a shoulder right here so that when our next piece slides on, it has a place to, it has a detent to stop so it doesn't continue to slide on. It's going to slide on the crimp. I just happen to have a 6-inch collar. So look at that. That's how two things that are the same go around. Even though this would have been a good collar, we could have used that collar. We could have used that one. So the fact that this has the flare on the end, that's not the reason that one is fitting inside, because we're going right past the flare. But isn't that beautiful? So then what we would do, we would put self-tapping screws. Since this is a material, this is 26 gauge galvanized, if you can cut it with your snips, if the material is light enough, you can cut it with your snips, use a pointy tip screw. If you can't cut it with your snips, use a drill tip screw. One of our other lessons has that in it. I think, can you think of anything I'm missing, huh? I don't think we're missing anything, but look at that beautiful squared around. 8x8, 1-inch flange, 6-inch round, 8 inches tall, and that's it right there. I think this is a good place to wrap it up right here. So thank you for going and watching episode 1. Imagine trying to watch episode 2 without 1. If you are watching episode 2 and you haven't seen 1, you got to go back and watch 1, or else this is going to make no sense at all. I'm glad you guys came along. Squared around, transition, triangulation. That thing's beautiful. I might put it on the hood of my car. It's that good. It looks that... No, I'm not going to put it on the car. All right. Introduction to triangulation. Sheet metal is fun. I'm so glad you guys came by. We appreciate you. We appreciate your time. If you make one, send us a picture. If you make a tool tray, we have an email. Check this out. So creative. sheetmetalisfun@yahoo.com. If you make something off of one of our lessons, send us a picture, and we're going to begin to print those pictures out, put them on our wall over here, and make wallpaper out of your accomplishments. Thanks for coming by. I'll see you guys next time. Sheet metal is fun.